Welcome to Bachelor of Property. Today I'm speaking with Adam Levin. He's a 26-year-old property investor who purchased his first property at 23. Since then, he's used a very cash flow heavy strategy to get into 3 more properties and now has 4 in his portfolio. Equipped with a Bachelor of Property Valuation, he walks us through how he evaluates the investment potential of a property, and how a whiteboard with a list of his goals helps him achieve his life's milestones. As always, seek your own professional financial, legal and property investment advice for your current situation. Everything we talk about is just our opinion and general in nature, and should never be considered as personal advice. But without any further ado, let's get house hunting with Adam. Adam Levin, welcome to Smash Over Property.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we've tried to tee this one up for a little while and it's been a bit of on and off and you quitting your job and a little bit of back and forth, but we finally got here.
Finally here. Yeah, it's been a pretty interesting couple of weeks, but I'm glad to be here now.
Yeah, I can't wait to dive a little bit more in about it. But firstly, I mean, what inspired you to get into property investing?
I guess I had a bit of influence in the people around me. I saw, I guess, what they were doing in terms of how they were investing in property and some of the freedom that it allowed them. A couple of people that I know have quite several properties, and the freedom that they've been able to do in terms of, not necessarily have to work, your 60, 65-hour weeks, I guess take the holidays whenever they want, and then really just, expand their potential income sources. That's exactly a few of the reasons why I decided to get into it. And then I was lucky enough that it actually hit me pretty early on. What I've been finding now, just through reading a lot of articles and talking to other people, is it only really hits people when they turn about 30, 35. For me, it hit me when I was like 21, 22, that was what I wanted to do with my life. And that was the route that I wanted to go down. So I'm pretty happy with the way that things have turned out in the past couple of years, and also those experiences helped shape, I guess, where I am today.
Yeah, it's kind of when that passive income trigger kicks in too. Like, I was probably a little bit younger than that, but I think, until that point came where I was like, oh, I can actually make my money work for me and, still have an income and still do a job, but also, over time accumulate capital growth and have some passive income that'll eventually replace my wage. I think when that triggered for me, it was obviously the same scenario you went through. So you're talking about kicking in about 21, 22 there. And then how long was it before you bought your first property?
So it was around 21. I was still at university studying property and valuation. And working, 3 other jobs on the side. And then I worked those for a year and a half, and I bought my first apartment when I was 23. And that one was located in Victoria. I then went on to buy another 3 late last year in New South Wales. The first one was 23. The next 3 actually was 25. And then I'm trying to have around 10 apartments or units, houses, whatever comes up by the time I'm 30. And then that way, for me, it's really like what you touched on earlier, like having that passive income means that then I don't necessarily have to work full-time hours. I can really take a step back and then enjoy life a bit more and have the lifestyle that I'm looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And just for context, how old are you now?
Just turned 26.
Yeah, nice. Wow. So yeah, apartment, that's interesting because, a lot of people can talk quite negatively about buying an apartment, but it sounds like you've actually done quite well off it. Has it accumulated some capital growth, or how did you manage to get into those next 3 from that original one?
Yeah, so with the first purchase, it's always been my investment philosophy to not necessarily focus entirely on capital gains or not focus necessarily entirely on rent returns. So what I've found is through, I guess, my career and a lot of the research that I've done is to realize your capital gains is quite difficult. Property being a pretty liquid asset, you have to sell it, takes a couple of months, and then there's a whole bunch of fees and charges you have to pay, and then as well capital gains tax. So at the end of the day, you're not really making the full amount that you really could because of all those fees and charges. Whereas if you have a property that's high rent, you can have the best of both worlds. You have one that does capital gains, one that has rent, and then that way you're getting, the properties that will give you the most return. The first one that I bought, I didn't necessarily leverage that to get the other three. I just worked bloody hard for those other 2 years to be able to afford it. So I actually only just quit like the 3 jobs that I was working like very, very recently. So it's been taking that entire time for me able to work through it and get all the savings in to afford it. But when you touched on the point about apartments and capital gains, it really just depends on, I guess, the apartment that you are focusing on. If you go to a lot of the volume apartments in the city, the ones that are focused on the students, I agree with everyone out there that says you're not going to get the returns you're after, because your apartment is only valued what the one below or above is going to get. So if that one below sold for 200 and the one above sold for 210, you're probably going to get within that ballpark as well. But it really just depends on the type of apartment that you're after and the one that you look for. I was lucky enough, the one I got was was only like a complex of 6. So there's not that much volume within that 6. Obviously I stayed away from the ones in the city. But that was just my thinking around the apartments and capital gains.
Yeah, for sure. I think for clarification on the apartment statement, I mean, what a lot of people say is just having an excess of supply. So if you buy in an apartment building that's got 200 apartments, you're always going to have rental competition. You're always going to have, comparable sales to everyone else who's selling in that building. But what it sounds like Adam's done is, picked a complex that only has a limited amount of supply, and there's not 100 different competitions that he's got to deal with. It's only 6, and it might be very rare that the owners of those 6 properties are selling, if they do. But yeah, I think you're spot on there with the balance thing too. Like, I mean, some people focus on higher rental yields just to get that cash flow coming in. A lot of people focus on capital growth because that's how they accumulate most money over time. But I think a balance is so key because, as I mean, we're in a really low interest environment right now, but and it's not forecasted to go up significantly anytime soon, but, never say never. And if it does, if you've got a high capital growth property and you can't afford the repayments when interest rates go up, you're not going to be able to sit and hold and, have all that capital growth in 10 or 20 years time if you can't afford it. If you have to sell it because you can't afford the repayments, well, you're losing out worse there. So I think you're spot on about having that balance.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think just being in the field that I am in, property development, cash flow, I found is the key to everything. You talk to any construction company, any developer, they're holding, especially developers, they're holding a site for, between 2 to 3 years. You're paying a ton of holding costs in that period, and you're not getting a lot of cash inflow. For me, it's always been about cash flow coming in, so then I can spend that money on what I want to spend it on, or use it how I want to see fit. Construction companies, again, they're spending a lot of money on all of their trades, and they have to manage their cash flow very efficiently. So again, if you can't afford the interest payments when they do go up, or if you're just on an interest-only loan and then you hit principal and interest, if you don't have that cash flow readily available, capital gains is essentially useless, because if you can't afford to pay it off, you're not going to realize it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to fork out all the selling costs. It costs 3% to sell the property, plus, all of the fees that you use to buy it, which is about 5%. Yeah. And then, if you're fortunate enough and you can go again, you're paying that 5% again on the next property you buy. So, that the sit and hold strategy kind of goes out of the window there. So it takes back to sort of that original purchase. I mean, what was the hardest part of getting started for you? You're talking about working those 3 jobs and saving very hard. And, was that a long process? I mean, how long did it take you to save that first deposit, and how much was it, if you don't mind us asking?
So it was a very long, tedious process. I think being around the age of 21, 22, all your friends going out every weekend, going to festivals during the summer, going out Friday, Saturday nights, going for dinners and things like that during the week, especially of the uni lifestyle as well. A lot of them were, uni parties, meeting your friends, traveling. So it was really tough to not spend. And just knowing that you have, X amount of dollars sitting in your bank account that you can't touch, it's quite mentally challenging, because if you just have like a brain fade and you're like, oh, I'm just going to go quick holiday to Europe and I'll, throw $5,000-$10,000 away, but I'll make it up. It's really hard to fight those urges and not do it and really save that money to make sure the interest accumulates. But the first property, I bought it for $265 in 2015, I believe it was. And the deposit was, at that stage, it was quite easy to get money, a loan from the bank. So the deposit only was about 11%. Obviously, I had to pay LMI on top of that, as well as any other stamp duty costs. So the total deposit was just below 46, including stamps and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's not too bad to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I've spoken to a lot of people by then, and everyone tries to predict the future. You can't predict it. You just need to do it, figure it out on the way, and then you learn, you live through your experiences, and they change you. And then for the next one, like that really helped in knowing what I was going for, in terms of the type of properties to look for and the amount of deposit I would have to save up. But for anyone that's thinking of buying a property, I think the most important thing is just to do it. You can wait forever. You just need to get in. You need to put your foot in the door. And once you buy the first one, you'll see how gratifying it is, because you've literally worked. However long it takes you to save your ass off. You've worked your ass off for as long as it takes, and then once you have it, it feels so good afterwards.
Yeah, it's that whole thing about, there's no wrong time to really get into the market, and the only right time to not buy a property is if you can save faster than property's growing. But you're going to need a significant amount of wage to cover that additional cost.
Yep.
So, being able to get in initially is pretty important, just to get yourself on the ladder there. And I think you're spot on about predicting the future. I mean, I bang on pretty heavily about these people who, claim to have these AI-driven algorithms that are going to predict the future, but it's just, there's so much that goes into the price of property. There's no way you can, accurately 100% predict, what the capital growth is going to be in 5-10 years time. You might be able to predict, what areas will do better than the average, but not these specific areas by specific amounts. And I think you're spot on there.
Yeah, the hardest bit is just, like I've said before, just the saving bit is the hardest bit by far. But also the hardest bit cannot be doing it. If you don't want to be one of those people that says in 10 years from now, oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen. I saw it in the market, but I just didn't have enough resources or enough willpower to follow it through. Like if there's an area that you've identified that you believe is going to go up, whether or not it goes up the entirety or it goes up a little bit, you've still done it. You're still in the market. And that way, that gives you so much leverage for your next future investments. Like now that I've got these 4 apartments, my leverage is a lot higher because I am able to use those for future investment purposes. So the hardest bit is not doing anything at all, really.
Yeah. And the next 3 purchases, were they sort of the same kind of apartments? Like, did you do some specific criteria search there, or what type of apartments were they?
So they're 2-bedroom apartments in New South Wales. They're in a regional town that has high rent returns. They have a lot of students or travelers that do their farm work. So they've got a high influx of people every 6 months or 12 months coming through that need accommodation. So I knew there would be a lot of people coming through there, and I knew that the capital gains in those areas aren't high, but that wasn't what I was going for. I was going for something that would be able to cover my rent, so where I live at the minute, plus also cover a car loan that I have. So I wanted to be able to make sure that none of that I was paying for out of my pocket, and then I would still be able to save through regular income from working. The whole purpose of me investing and getting these rent returns is so that will offset my living costs. And then that way I'm able to save a lot faster, a lot quicker. So the criteria was really a block of units in a regional area. It didn't have to be in Victoria. Like I've never physically visited the ones in New South Wales. I obviously got a building report, and I spoke to the managers. So the rental managers asked what the tenants are like, what they do for work, just to make sure they're not going to leave after a month. So I did a bit of background like that. But yeah, it was really just a block of units in anywhere in Victoria, New South Wales, and ones that when I put through my feasibility, inputting all the water, council rates, everything like that, shot out, a really good a rental yield, and that was something that I was prepared to go for.
Yeah, yeah, nice. And so, I mean, you talk a little bit there about carving your day-to-day costs from your rental income, and then also having 10 properties by the time you're 30. Was that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And is that your sort of goal for property investing right now, or do you have like a sort of, retirement goal in plan as well?
For me, working in property development, I do want to become a developer essentially one day, whether or not that's in my own company, or whether or not that's, take on a full-time DM role with another developer. But on the flip side of that, with those 10 apartments that I want, by the time I'm 30, I could also just have not like an early retirement, but like a semi-retirement where I can just use that income to really just travel as much as I want and then do a bit of work on the side. So I'm really not too sure which avenue I want to go down yet. I'm still quite young, and in the entirety of a career path, I think you work for like 45, 50 years these days. I'm only 2 years into my career, so I'm not exactly too sure where I'm going to go yet. But it will definitely have a large influence on, I guess, my investment strategy going forward.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And do you think that first initial apartment was your most successful deal, or do you reckon these other threes have now been your most successful deal?
Good question. I don't really know yet. I think right now it would be the 3 apartments in New South Wales, just because of the rental income I'm getting out of it. The first one in Victoria, I didn't refinance. I changed the interest rate because the 2-year first loan period was up. So the interest rate loan period was up. So I renegotiated a new interest rate, but I didn't realize those gains yet. So I'm not exactly sure how much equity I can take out. If I can take out, a substantial amount, then that will be the most successful one. But right now it's really the 3 in New South Wales, which is the best one.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. And yeah, I think just because you got the 3 is probably, a good thing as well. There's a little bit of flexibility there.
Yeah, I mean, currently they're all on one title. So if I did want to separately title them, I could then, individually sell them off and get some of that cash back in if I needed it. That's also a great thing about having a block of units. If they're all on one title, you can just individually title them, and then you can sell them off as you need to, really, and then that can give you a bit of a cash injection as well. Or alternatively, you just keep it on the one title and just keep it how it is.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's awesome. I didn't realize they were all on the same one. So yeah, there's there's an additional little benefit there that you can utilize if you need to as well. So you talked a little bit about doing some analysis and getting your building and pest inspection done and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, is there anything else that you use to assess the investment potential of a property?
I never do anything too quickly. If there's an offer out there that's too good to be true, it usually is. There's usually something that they're hiding, because everybody has a motivation to sell. So you've really got to ask the agent why they're wanting to sell. In my case, the one in New South Wales, the guy was relocating back to Sydney. He no longer needed that investment property. He was going to retire. He just wanted to sell it, get the money out, and then, I don't know, do whatever he wanted to do with his retirement. But you've got to be careful with people that are trying to hide things from you. There might be, I guess, mold or asbestos or things that are a bit nasty that you really need to make sure that you're on the lookout for. So I actually, before I bought the first one in Vic, I was going to buy another one that was maybe, pretty similar in terms of the apartment, in terms of location, but there was actually asbestos that we found in the building, and actually the floorboards in the living area were actually sinking. So that was because the stumps in the ground were also being eaten by termites. So you've really got to be thorough in what your DD is. So I'll always take at least 6 months of research to find the right place, because it is a lot of money. And you really need to be careful that you make the right decision, because at the end of the day, once you've bought it. There's very few avenues you can go down if you feel like something isn't right, or you've picked up on something now, because once that contract's signed, your cooling off period is gone. That's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've really got to be careful in how you approach it. And yeah, make sure that you take your time. There is absolutely no rush in this. I know a lot of people try to get rich young, and it's probably a lot of people from, I guess, our generation. But the most important thing is just be patient.
Yeah, for sure. All good things come in time, and I think that the longer you can do an analysis and just, really go through I mean, it's commonly said that people spend more time booking their next holiday than going through their investment property, and it's
Yeah,
the biggest financial decision they'll ever make in their life. So don't be scared to annoy the leasing manager and say, hey, can I come through again? Hey, can I come through again? And bring your
yeah,
family, bring builders, bring building and pest inspectors to do their job for you, and
yeah.
really make sure that's the right decision that you make. And do you think that's probably been one of your most successful property strategies, like just getting all of these sort of people in to do analysis for you, and then having that high rental return?
Yeah, a high rental return right now is definitely the best strategy for me. I'm sure once, I can afford to pay a lot more holding costs and pay off, a bit of a higher mortgage and um, in an apartment that isn't giving me that many returns, that will be the strategy. But right now, it's definitely, I'm focusing on cash flow. And also cash flow, it gives you the flexibility to really do really whatever you want. If you're making $5,000 a month net off your, off your investments, that's what, 60,000 a year. Take out a few costs here and there, drop it down to 55, 50. That's still pretty good money for not working. And you add that to a normal salary. What's average wage in Australia? Like 80,000. You're still hitting 130 a year, and you're really only working for $80,000 of that. So for me right now, yeah, it's definitely cash flow is definitely king.
Yeah, for sure, exactly. And in a low rental or in a low interest rate environment, that keeping that cash flow and maintaining that cash flow so that you can hold on to your properties is so critical too.
Yeah.
So I mean, how are you managing your risks? Is there sort of an exit strategy that you've got in plan?
Um, My exit strategy, I don't really have one. I plan to hold on to the properties long term.
Hmm.
Obviously, I again don't predict the future. So if worst comes to worst and I do have to sell them, I have to do what I have to do. But yeah, long term plan is definitely to hold on to the properties. And the way I manage risk is really to reduce it as much as I can. So for example, the first apartment in Victoria that I bought, I made sure that it was close to all amenities, public transport, food, shopping, major roads, things like that, because that's what's going to attract the most tenants. If you go for a property that doesn't have any public transport, most likely you're not going to get any students in there, because students need public transport to get to and from uni or school, whatever it may be. And so you're only really going to attract the young professional or family market. Um, that's one way. The other way is just to make sure that if it is being currently tenanted, make sure that they're good tenants, make sure they have proper jobs and, they've got a history of rental.
Yeah.
Um, and lastly, I just make sure that, the area that you're going to buy and you are confident in, you're confident in the industries that work in there. The one in New South Wales being a regional town, I did a lot of research in the surrounding areas and what the main jobs were that people work there. And in the actual suburb or area itself, where the ones in New South Wales are, I made sure that I was very confident in who the tenants were, because it did come already tenanted. I made sure that the leases they were signed up on were month to month, and they were 12 months.
Yeah.
And I made sure that I guess what their long-term plans were, so if they were thinking of moving out or if they were going to stay, were something that I was prepared to live with. And I haven't had any complaints since I bought it, and it's been about 12 months, so it's been a pretty good result.
Yeah, that's perfect. I was gonna ask you if they're still in there now, which it sounds like they are, and there hasn't been
Yeah,
any
they are. Yeah, it's been good.
and there hasn't been any conversation of them wanting to leave or anything like that.
No, none of them. One of the fellas in there, he's retired, so he's pretty content where he is. The other one's family. Kids go to primary school there. And then the other one is the local taxi driver. So they're all pretty stable. They're all, within the community. And there hasn't really been any conversation of anyone wanting to pack up
Yeah, that's
and leave.
great.
Yeah.
Even the fact that you know who they are and what they're about, and you know what their story is,
Yeah,
drives into the factor of you doing your risk analysis and doing some due diligence as well. They're not just there for work for the next 6 months and then plan to leave, sort of thing. So
yeah,
sounds like you've really done
yeah.
your research. So you talked a little bit before about the first apartment or the first place that you were going to buy in Melbourne, but you didn't because of all the things that you found wrong with it. But it sounds
Yeah.
like you've saved yourself from a mistake there. But has there been any other mistakes that you've made during your investment journey?
Any other mistakes? I guess actually the biggest one I think about it is structuring of the loans. When I went for my loan applications for all of the investments, I didn't realize that you can get offset mortgage loans, and that then reduces the amount of interest you pay. And now the way that my accounts are set up, I can't actually change to an offset. So I can, obviously change banks and do it that way, but I don't know. I don't know enough about offset and which accounts actually go for to do it. But if I had known, I would have definitely done it. I've got like one of my mentors, he's got 2 apartments and both of them are offset accounts.
Yeah.
And his interest repayments have been dropped significantly. So
Yeah.
that's definitely the biggest mistake that I've made so far.
Yeah.
But again, it's a learning experience. So I know for the next ones that I buy, I'll definitely go for an offset account. But at the end of the day, you making mistakes to live and learn. So for the next ones, I'll definitely make sure it's an offset.
Yeah, and for those who aren't sure what an offset account is, it's basically a separate account against your loan, and whatever money that you have in there reduces from the amount of interest that you're paying on the total loan. So if you had a $500,000 loan and you had $100,000 in your offset account, you'd only be paying interest on $400,000. So it kind of like reduces the interest. And the whole benefit of that is, you instead of having $100,000 in a saving account at 2% per annum, which means you're earning more money, which means you have to pay tax on the money. You've actually got it in an offset account, which reduces the amount that you have to pay on a mortgage, which might be 4%, right? And then you're reducing the amount of money that's incoming. So you're reducing the amount, you're saving tax there as well. Sometimes money saved is better than money earned, really. But yeah, for sure, I'm the same. When I first learned about offset accounts, I was like, oh, my mind was blown, kind of thing.
It's a great little tool that you can, again, like you said, reduce the amount of interest that you pay. So I definitely recommend it for people when they're going to go for that loan application, to definitely consider it. If it fits in what you want to achieve, then 100% go for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, by learning all this stuff, I mean, you talked about your mentor before, but has there been any sort of resources or articles or books or podcasts or mentors that you've kind of learned from?
Yeah, I have had both of my first boss. He has been a great mentor for me. He was the one that really got me thinking about property and the ways that it's changed his life. And now he runs obviously a development company. He's the boss that I used to work for. He does his own developments on the side, and he's told me how much owning these properties has changed his life and has given him more freedom and more flexibility to do what he really wants to do. My other mentor, who also, funnily enough, works at the same company, he is the sole breadwinner, and he's got 4 kids under the age of 12. And so that his investment strategy is really to help, obviously fund putting food on the table and providing for his kids and for his family. So he's also really helped me in the way that he looks for properties and what he looks for. He's a bit different to myself. Obviously, I don't have any dependents, whereas he has 4. So his strategy is a little different to mine.
Yeah.
But there's that. But then there's also, heaps of research out there on REA domain. There's heaps of peer-reviewed studies. You can always read any of the articles you find online about, the housing market. Obviously, try not to read it too much into, I guess, what some of the doomsday say about the housing market and things like that. Just try to keep a level head about it. No one can predict the future. No one knows exactly what's going to happen. But just make sure you read, a combination of articles, and you get different ideas and different sources. And as well, the biggest thing probably was actually studying property valuation at university. that really gave me the in-depth foundation to understand exactly what I was looking at and what I was going to look for in my career. So yeah, that's just a couple of tips. But in terms of books, there are a few that I've read, but I actually can't remember off the top of my head right now. I've got like a bunch of them that I guarantee I'll remember after this. But right now, yeah, I just can't quite remember.
No, that's all right. Maybe if you do remember, send them through and we'll let them in the show notes or something like that so the viewers can
Yeah.
have a look and see what ones they are. But yeah, I think you're totally right there with the online articles. I mean, there's a lot of bullish and bearish property, markets
Yeah.
people out there who are, so pro the property market, and it's just going to continue to double every 10 years. And then you've got these guys that fly in from America every couple of years and predict that the market's going to crash like it did over there. And it's just, there's a lot that you can get confused and caught up on. And I think, even by reading a broad range of different things, you can eventually, suss out which ones are sort of being really bullish or really bearish, and then have a good understanding of all these different people's opinions on the market as well. And, as you said, no one can predict the future. So you can only take it as a grain of sand.
Yeah, just make sure like you said, just get a different range of people that have different opinions. It's like, if you want to be surrounded by one type of person and some type of thought process, you're only going to get that opinion. If you want to get someone else who has a different opinion and that doesn't necessarily agree with you, but it might, change your way of thinking to be more balanced, then I would definitely suggest it. Especially with property, the money you're putting in it is a lot. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of, blood, sweat and tears and investment in one product. So you want to make sure that the areas you're researching, the people you're speaking to, you do trust them and you do get, a full range of understanding and knowledge in the area.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you sound like you're a pretty switched on kind of guy. And I mean, is there anything, like, do you have a favorite quote or something that sort of motivates you or what gets you up in the morning?
I'm not a big one for quotes, to be honest, but what advice I will give to those that are trying to, achieve their investment goals and, want to kind of get that first step on the property ladder. What I do, I have a whiteboard in my room and I will write down everything on that whiteboard. So right now I've got goals 2020 on there, and that's just a couple of dot points that I have. I know it's actually very close to the end of the year now I think about it. But I've got a bunch of dot points on there, and then every morning I'll obviously turn over, look at it, and then that gets me going for the day. And that's the motivation that I need to really get out of bed and just, get after it for the day. Writing everything down, making lists, and then really prioritizing. So for example, like I said, being a millennial, or our generation, smash dabo generation, like they all say, you've really got to be really headstrong and actually really be really focused on not spending your money in unnecessary ways. Really, for me, the best thing, like I said, was writing it down. Looking at it every morning reinforces it. So that's probably the best tip that I could possibly give someone if they want to get their first foot on the property ladder. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I'm actually looking at it right now, and I've got I've got goals for next year, even already organized. I've got it, my 2020 goals. I've got every month broken down for next year and what I want to achieve in every single month. And then on top of that, that feeds into my weekly goals. So things I want to achieve every week. And then same again for every day. Every morning I wake up, I make myself a coffee, and the first thing I do is write down 4 things that I want to achieve in my work life and 4 things I want to achieve in my personal life for that day. And I'm a big fan of balance, but I can't rest or watch Netflix or play a video game until those 8 things are all ticked off for the day, sort of thing. So I think, having the goals and just having that limit to say, just being able to go home from work or go home at the end of the day and being like, yeah, I've actually achieved everything I set out to do today, is a great sense of fulfillment. And over time, these little things accumulate into the big things of, buying investment properties and hitting your goals and all the other things.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's all about the small habits that you develop at a young age that will all translate into massive achievements when you're older. And on that point, I'm a huge believer in delayed gratification. delayed gratification for me is probably the number one thing that any young person can get into their mindset. If you're able to understand that, no, actually, I'm not going to go out for breakfast this weekend. I'm going to save that money and put it in a savings account. That then, if you do that once a month or even twice a month, that money will soon accumulate into a large amount of money that you can eventually put towards, first property or your first investment, whatever it may be. But delayed gratification, understanding that good things do take time, is really, really important. And for me, I'm a bit backwards, I want to be able to, semi-retire by the time I'm in my 30s and then do all my traveling, and then do the things that I want to do then. I'm not really such a believer in what a lot of my friends are in terms of, I'll travel while I'm young and then, I've got the next 50 years to work, because by the time they're 35 and you're 35, you're the one that's traveling and having all these amazing experiences and you're able to afford it, and not give up all that income that you think you're missing out on that they now have to work for. If they're working, 60-hour weeks, 50-hour weeks, and they're mid-30s raising a family and all that kind of stuff, if that's their, what their goals and what they're trying to achieve, that's great. I've got nothing against that. But for my personal ambition and my personal goals, I want to be able to, do things that I really want to do and not have to be such a slave to a single source of income when I do hit that age.
Yeah, exactly. It's that whole sort of, you can either pay now and play later or play now and pay later sort of scenario. And I love what you touched on there about, even if it's one breakfast a month. And I think that's, a lot of people listen to this stuff and they're like, oh, well, I want to get my smashed avocado and my almond latte every day. And it's, it doesn't have to be every day. You can still enjoy it on a weekend day once, but if you just bite down on how many times and how frequently, if it is once a month that you can, really go out and enjoy yourself and plan it in and look forward to it and book it in, your life's not going to change. You're not going to be depressed by not having, a smashed avocado every day. It's just about maintaining and regulating how much is outgoing.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it'll make it more special as well. If you get something every single day, it kind of loses its touch. Whereas if you get it once a week, you'll really enjoy the moment and you'll really savor it a lot more, knowing that you have earned it. But on that point as well, another tip that I also do in terms of watching how much I spend, I actually keep an Excel spreadsheet, and this is something that I've picked up from another this person that I've been speaking to in their property journey and how they track all their spending. They recommend to put an Excel spreadsheet together, literally write earnings and spendings, and put it down each day. And then that way you can really track exactly what you're spending it on. So for me, honestly, the biggest thing I spend on is petrol. That is the biggest expense that I have. I'll really very rarely spend my money on anything else. But I think that's also just my mindset, is just delay gratification, just try to limit my spending so that I can invest it later on. And that way I actually know where my money's going, how much of it's going, when it's going, and then that helps with cash flow as well. So if you know that, obviously I've just quit my job, so I don't have that regular income coming in, I know exactly how much money I'll need for X, Y, and Z. And then that means that I can then track my money, and make sure that I'll be able to cover any costs that do come up, whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly. You know where your money's going. You know where your biggest expenses are. You know that, you've quit your job and you've got X amount of dollars in your savings. And if you continue, you maintain your lifestyle now, you can you can hold it up for the next 3 to 6 months. You know what I mean? You can predict that sort of stuff. Whereas if you just don't know and you're spending blindly, it's easy to run out of financial resources quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on, Adam.
Sure, easy, Joy. I'm glad I could help.
What a great conversation. For me, the biggest insight has been writing down all of your goals, tracking your spending, and being able to identify where your biggest expenses are, and turning them into an enjoyable reward rather than an everyday routine activity. I'm always looking for more guests to come onto the show. If you're under 30 and have one or more investment properties, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, I would love to talk to you about it. The main focus is to help other soon-to-be young investors with tips and tricks along the journey, learn from the mistakes that we have made, and ignite the fire to set themselves up financially for the rest of their lives. If you're interested in sharing your story, you can go to jordandeyoung.com/podcasts, where there's a podcast inquiry button at the top that will guide you through the next steps. Also, if you're keen for more content like this, make sure you subscribe, and please leave us a review with any feedback for future podcasts. And until next time, happy house hunting.